Greetings to all C3RF members and friends across Canada and indeed around the world, and a special welcome to the folks at Veterans for Freedom on their dedicated streaming channels as they view this video summary of the C3RF update for 27 September 2024. The title of this update is Untethered, and it kicks off by referencing the C3RF In Hot interview with Brian Peckford and how it was instructive on several fronts. As the last living First Minister who played a hands-on role in patriating Canada's Constitution and drafting its embedded charter, Brian is uniquely qualified to shine a light on the intent that underpinned the wording of that latter document. Interestingly, he notes that the charter's preamble was never labeled as such by its framers, as this moniker was hatched by constitutional camp followers who sought to distance the opening phrases of the charter from its follow-on sections and any substantive interpretation. Peckford asserts that the statement that the Charter was founded on principles, I quote, that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law, unquote, was not simply a lofty musing. It was rather a two-pronged directive that was meant to serve as a lens through which the whole of this foundational document was to be interpreted. Indeed, this meaning was made very clear in the purposeful insertion of a colon after the so-called preamble to make this relationship clear. A second point disclosed during the course of the In Hot interview was the extent to which legislatures and the judiciary were prepared to go to keep the Charter and its fundamental freedoms out of sight and out of mind. So it was, as Peckford noted, the technicalities that were used to keep his own travel mandates legal suit from any serious review by the federal appeals and Supreme Courts of Canada. Indeed, the sleight of hand known as mootness was employed at all three levels of federal jurisprudence, even though the travel mandate issue remains active as a suspended matter that is still the source of much public interest. Such simmering possibilities responsible for so much ongoing public angst was remarked on by federal court judge Richard Mosley, who ruled that the invocation of the Emergencies Act was unreasonable. He stated that the, quote, social cost, unquote, of leaving such issues unresolved was, quote, large and undeniable given the public's thirst for answers, unquote. They most certainly did not deserve the cover of mootness. It would seem that the overwhelming body of our federal judiciary believe that fundamental charter rights and freedoms can be overridden by government mandate. Given this exhibited reality, Mosley can be seen as an outrider, with his insistence that such civil liberties can only be constrained with justifications that can be both demonstrated and seen to be suitable in a free and democratic society. Regardless, and given his now in-place decision and reasoning for disallowing mootness as a Crown defense in his Emergencies Act ruling, it is difficult to see how the Supreme Court could refuse to hear the travel mandate case, and instead allow the matter of a citizen's mobility rights to be a continuing source of worry and fear. As far as our judiciary writ large is concerned, mistakes may have been made by governing agencies in addressing the Wuhan virus pandemic, but their rectification pales in comparison to the need to safeguard the reputations of responsible authorities. Administrative tribunals have the priority. Peckford noted in his interview with the C3RF that administrative tribunals actually rule the day in Canada. They cannot be challenged, even by charter protections that were specifically put in place to protect the good people of Canada from such bureaucratic overreach. On the domestic scene, we see this with Bill C-63 and its brash proposal to institute a digital safety commission capable of sidestepping such menial charter protections as those associated with search and seizure, due process, and free speech, not to mention any obligation to respect long-held rules of evidence. Another such bureaucratic tribunal can be seen to be hard at work in the form of the Foreign Interference Commission. What to think when the head of this commission, Justice Marie-Josée Hogue, refuses to identify alleged traitors operating freely within Canadian Parliament at the behest of foreign governments? Does this not detract from a citizen's right, as detailed in Section 3 of the Charter, to, quote, play a meaningful role in the electoral process, unquote? Administrative tribunals on the domestic scene are one thing, but of equal concern are those that Canadians are expected to be beholden to at the international level. Prime among these, and of recent concern, are those fielded by globalist organizations like the World Health Organization, or the WHO. Witness the One Health initiative floated by the same organization that calls for an equivalency to be established between the health of humans, animals, and even plants. After all, quote, everything is interconnected, humans, animals, plants, and the climate system, unquote. So why should human health hold any special sway over the allocation of medical resources that need to be dispensed globally? The fact that Canada has signed up to such public health policies as detailed by the WHO's International Regulations, or IHR, now means that Canada has signed away its sovereignty in such matters and handed them over to an administrative tribunal located in Geneva. Canada's decision to bend the knee to offshore bureaucratic agencies was taken absent any public input or debate. It is evidenced by in the federal government's legislative efforts in the form of Bill C293, the Pandemic Prevention and Preparedness Act, and specifically calls for acceptance of and adherence to the WHO's One Health policies. Of particular note when it comes to related rules is the fact that Canada is basically along for the ride when a medical emergency is declared and the WHO takes radical control to, among many things, autonomously enter contracts with pharmaceutical companies, impose travel restrictions on citizens, and mandate standardized medical interventions, and establish a broader global biosurveillance system, including permanent vaccination passports. The control loop is closed by the fact that it is the WHO's own Director General who has the power to declare such emergencies, and such exigencies may be sparked by climate changes deemed capable of potentially triggering a pandemic. Forget about responding to viruses. The next wildfire may see Canada locked down as it was during the Wuhan virus pandemic. The outsourcing of decision-making processes to administrative tribunals far and wide represents a clear and present danger to the health of Canada's representative democracy. Queen's University law professor Bruce Pardy went into some detail on the related dangers associated with decision-making by administrative tribunal in his testimony before the National Citizen Inquiry in March of 2023. He noted that Western governments, including Canada's, have fallen in love with a delegation doctrine that sees elected representatives handing off responsibility for implementing the laws they make on our behalf over to an administrative state. The state, full up with tribunals manned by appointed acolytes of the ruling regime, is more than happy to shape these policies and laws through regulations amenable to the narratives of the day. What better way to ensure that living free thinking can be applied liberally to address the, quote, realities of modern life, unquote. The administrative state, once in place, easily becomes a self-reinforcing entity that is hard to derail. After all, the offloading of responsibility by elected representatives to an amorphous tribunal of rule makers is a great way to avoid the slings and arrows that come with decision-making. And so politicians can claim no responsibility for the hardships that came with locking down the economy on the heels of the Wuhan virus, as they were simply following public health recommendations. Problem is, the fact that they bear no responsibility for outcomes means they also have no responsibility to rectify mistakes that harmed their constituents. Incredibly, this clears the same public health agencies, stretching all the way back to WHO authorities in Geneva, if Bill 293 is enacted, to repeat the same errors as, quote, public health officials are not qualified to manage emergencies that impact every aspect of society, unquote. As elected representatives become untethered from the desires of their own constituents, the powers of the administrative state become all-powerful. These powers, lacking any check and balance, have been described by philosopher Ayn Rand as working hand-in-hand with altruistic collectivism to create a tyranny that operates outside of any need to respect individual rights and freedoms. And so, measures are brought to bear that further preclude the rise of countervailing speech, including those that involve coordination with other like-minded authorities at the international level. Seen in this light, Canadian bills like C-63 that curtail free speech are simply adjuncts to initiatives like the 2021 Counter-Disinformation Unit that came out of the United Kingdom that instructed a plethora of Western democracies like the US, Australia, and Canada, not to mention bilateral relationships with 20 additional countries, to learn how to censor speech. Clearly, it is time for the untethering process to be reversed by a united community of, quote, we the people, unquote. In closing, a reminder to join us at CanadianCitizens.org, where you can see this update in its full glory, including all the links to all of the cited documents. Simply go to the News tab at the top of the page and select C3RF Member Updates from the drop-down menu. Until next time, this is Russ Cooper signing off, wishing you and yours much happiness and freedom from C3RF.